with you about stigma. And I want to thank the Idaho Federation of Families and the Department of Health and Welfare, and especially Children's Mental Health, for the attention that you've paid to this issue this month, because stigma is important. This is something that affects all of us, not just those of us who are parents of children who have mental illness. Words have power. On December 14th, 2012, 2 days after my 13-year-old son, let's call him Michael, was placed in an acute care mental hospital, 20-year-old Adam Lanza shot his mother. Then he went to an elementary school where he killed 20 first graders and 6 brave educators. And then he shot himself. That day, I wrote and posted an essay on my formerly, but no longer, anonymous blog, The Anarchist Soccer Mom, in which I admitted to myself and to the world, for the first time, my own feelings of helplessness and fear and frustration. Here's some of what I wrote. This problem is too big for me to handle on my own. Sometimes there are no good options, so you just pray for grace and trust that in hindsight, it will all make sense. I'm sharing this story because I am Adam Lanza's mother. I'm Dylan Klebold's and Eric Harris's mother. I'm James Holmes' mother. I'm Jared Loeffner's mother. I'm Sung-Hui Cho's mother. And these boys and their mothers need help. In the wake of another horrific national tragedy, it's easy to talk about guns, but it's time to talk about mental illness. I posted this anonymous essay, which I called Thinking the Unthinkable, to my Facebook page. And I encouraged my friends to share it. And they did, in record numbers. I thought, clearly I touched a nerve. The next day, my good friend Nate Hoffman, who's the editor of the Blue Review, which is a Boise State online journal, called me up and he said, I want this story. This is an important story. And I said, sure, you can republish it anonymously. That's fine. And he said, no. I want this story because it's your story, and I want you to put your name on it. And that was my beginning understanding of what stigma means to parents of children who have mental illness. Because I was afraid. I was afraid to put my name on my own story. I wasn't afraid of what the world would think, though apparently I should have been. I was afraid of what my community would think, what my coworkers would think, what my friends would think. I'm a mom of a child who's had mental illness for a long, long time. And I've been afraid to talk about it. I have been afraid to share my family's story. After Nate and I talked for a while, he said, if you put your name on this, people will know it's real. And I agreed. Nate was one of a small handful of people who knew about my struggles with my son, who knew why I would sometimes cry at my cubicle, or sometimes leave work in a rush, or cringe if my cell phone went off in a meeting. It was usually the school, sometimes the police. So in the end, I agreed, and I put my name on this essay. And I let Nate give it a new title. Sometimes I wonder if I should have done that. And the title he gave it was a pretty good title. I am Adam Lanza's mother. Words have power. These are my words, right here. And this is my story. But it's apparently a lot of other people's stories as well. The internet response to my post was overwhelming. Before December 14th, 2012, my formerly anonymous blog had maybe 4,000 hits total. As of March, the Anarchist Soccer Moms had more than 3 million views and nearly 4,000 comments. These numbers are overwhelming to me. The reprint on HuffPost, which picked up the story from the Blue Review, was one of the most popular articles for several days. It received 1.2 million likes on Facebook, 323,000 shares, more than 15,000 comments, 16,800 tweets, 29,800 emails. I haven't read them all, and I apologize. Months later, people are still talking about it. Reader's Digest is reprinting it this month. Journalists from Anderson Cooper to Miles O'Brien to Diane Sawyer have asked me to share my family's story. And last week I signed a book deal with Hudson Street Press. All of this points to one thing. It's clearly time to talk about mental health. Most people who read my blog agreed. You told my story was by far the most common response. Yet I quickly learned a new word for that fear that I felt about putting my name on my own story. And that word, as we know today from this conference, is stigma. I'm a classicist by training, so I like to think about where words come from and what they mean. And stigma is Greek in origin. It means a sign or a branding mark. It's kind of ironic because so often people who have mental illness don't show any outward signs of that illness. So we don't always understand or have the compassion that we should have for people who suffer from these conditions, like what my son has. The word privacy, also an interesting word to me. It comes from a Latin word, prius, no, not the car, but a word that means separate or alone. And that's related to the Latin word privare, which means to steal or to rob. That's the problem with most mental illness. It's not always apparent. Parents of children with mental illness feel alone. We feel isolated. We sometimes feel like our children have been taken from us, like they've been stolen. Sorry. Today, I want to share for the first time some of the negative consequences of stigma for my family. I have not talked publicly about the most painful consequence, and I'm going to talk about it today. Because it's more than any loving parent should ever have to endure. On December 24th, 2012, the day before Christmas, an Ada County judge signed an ex parte motion to take my younger two children from me because he said their brother was in imminent danger. Now, never mind that my son's doctors didn't agree with that statement. Never mind that I've worked with these poor, long-suffering people in health and welfare for years. Some of them are probably sick of me. Never mind any of that. Never mind that I had a well-articulated written safety plan for all of my children and have had that for several years, as every parent who has a child with mental illness should and must have. Safety plans are important. The judge didn't talk to the doctors, and he didn't talk to me. The order has some frightening language in it. It says that I could have my children, my 7- and 9-year-old, back when I place their brother in a residential treatment home. Again, no consultation with doctors, no decisions about whether that was right for my child, because caregivers don't think that's right for him. That was my choice. I thought, oh, this is no big deal. This is just a judge reacting to the blog. I understand that. This will all be fixed in a few days. He'll talk to me. He'll talk to the doctors. I'm staring down Mother's Day and I don't have my children back yet. And I think there's one reason for that. And that reason is stigma. Plain and simple. I talked, I shared my story, and I was punished. And my children were punished. All of them. This is wrong. just wrong. Despite all of that, I'm here to speak up today for my child, for your children. Shortly after my blog went viral, and after I lost my younger two children, Carolyn Hawley, who's a local journalist I really respect and admire, interviewed me about the backlash that I experienced. Some of you may have seen it. She kept asking me the same question. Aren't you worried about the stigma? Aren't you worried about the stigma for your son? And in that moment, speaking with her, I truly crossed over from privacy to advocacy. And I realized that no, I'm not worried about the stigma for my son. My son's a great kid, and I'm a great mom. And I'm not ashamed to speak up for my child. And you shouldn't be ashamed to speak up for your child either. This was a hugely liberating moment for me. I found my voice. Children can't always speak up for themselves. So as parents, no matter what the consequences, and the consequences I faced were harsh, we still have to speak up for our children. And we're not alone. The most powerful thing I've learned from this whole experience have been the stories of other families. To date, thousands of people have contacted me to share their own struggles and their fears and their worries, because every parent wants what I want for my child, that he or she will live a happy, productive life. That's what all parents want for their children. I realized that far from being alone in my initial response to the Sandy Hook shooting, I was a member of a desperate community. And that community includes parents, it includes social workers, it includes police officers, teachers, school principals, and school counselors, all of them struggling to deal with the same challenges my son and I face, sometimes worse, with increasingly limited resources and options. I want to believe that by telling our stories and by speaking up for our children, we can change this world. This is a picture of my son. At its low point, what happened to me and to my children illustrates exactly why parents are afraid to speak up for their mentally ill kids. Today's the first time I've shared this part of my story in public. I learned that words can hurt, but I believe that words have the power to heal. I'm fortunate and blessed to have 4 amazing, bright, delightful children. I'm blessed with a secure knowledge of my younger children's love for me and for their brother. My daughter made a poster for this poster contest that we had statewide, and what she wrote on it was, "My brother matters," and she loves her brother so much. I know as a family we'll come out of this experience and we'll be stronger, and that love will be even greater. But my story shows why we as parents need to find the courage to speak up for our kids. The Department of Health and Welfare has been amazingly responsive to my son's needs after that blog post. The Boise Police Department deserves special mention for their compassionate approach to children with mental illness. On a day when my son pulled a knife on me after I asked him to return his library books, the police responded quickly, and they were so kind and caring. I will never forget the police officer who saw my distress as my son was loaded, kicking and screaming, into the back of an ambulance. "You're a good mom, ma'am," he said. "Never forget that." It's easy to blame yourself when your child is suffering. But when self-blame leads to shame and silence, our children, our families, and our communities suffer. This May, I'd urge all of you to think about the word stigma and what it means to you. Then think about what you can do to embrace and accept and love the people in your life who have mental illness. There are already many effective interventions and treatments, and this year promises even more. But as long as we, as parents, refuse to admit that we need help, we will not have access to much needed solutions. I think that's what children's mental health needs. Not just my son as a poster child, but all children as poster children for this important cause. We can make a difference. We need to speak up for our kids.